Natalie Wood apparently slipped, hit her head.
The coroner's office said today that actress Natalie Wood was intoxicated and angry after an argument.
On a freezing November night in 1981, Hollywood's golden star, Natalie, vanished without a trace from her luxurious yacht under the dark sky. When the first light of dawn crept across the waves, her body was discovered drifting lifeless in the black, icy water, still dressed in a thin nightgown and a blood-red coat that sent chills through anyone who saw it. Authorities quickly called it a tragic accident, claiming she slipped while trying to secure the small dinghy. But the bruises, the deep scratches on her arms, and her well-known fear of water told a darker story. Natalie had never gone near open water alone, not once. So how could this have happened? People started whispering that it wasn't bad luck at all, but something far more sinister.
They reopened the Natalie Wood thing. Mm-hmm. Did you ever comment on that?
No, I never did.
You wouldn't cooperate with the...
Well, I had already had cooperated with them, you know.
Yeah, you wrote it in your book.
Yeah, but there wasn't anything left to say, Larry. You know, when that accident happened, there were so many people on top of that.
Suspicion immediately turned toward her husband, actor Robert Wagner. Friends of Natalie had spoken for years, saying Wagner often lost control, sometimes even lashing out in rage. The gossip around Hollywood burned hot. Talk of jealousy, wild arguments, and a drunken night that spiraled into tragedy. Many believed it wasn't an accident, but a deadly confrontation that ended Natalie's life forever. As the years passed, the case refused to rest. The police reopened the investigation, and witnesses came forward with new stories, yet the truth stayed buried beneath the cold surface of that endless water, the same place Natalie took her final breath. Now, at 95 years old, Robert Wagner has finally broken his silence. In a recorded interview, his trembling voice confessed fragments of that haunting night. "There are many things I wish I could change," he said, a statement that sent shockwaves through everyone listening. Was this truly a tragic accident, or a long-hidden crime buried under Hollywood's sparkling lights? What secrets is Wagner revealing after more than 40 years? Let's uncover everything in this video. The night of November 28, 1981, began like any other for Hollywood royalty, Natalie Wood and Robert Wagner. Glamorous, glittering, and surrounded by close friends aboard their yacht, the Splendor, anchored near Catalina Island. That day had been picture perfect, filled with laughter, drinks, and endless chatter with their guests, actor Christopher Walken and Captain Dennis DeVerne. But as darkness settled over the ocean, the air shifted. Something heavy lingered, a tension no one could quite explain. No one aboard knew that this Thanksgiving weekend escape would turn into one of Hollywood's most chilling, unsolved mysteries. Natalie, who had always feared deep water and never learned to swim, was unknowingly stepping into the final hours of her life. The laughter that once echoed across the deck would soon fade into silence, replaced by whispers, doubt, and haunting questions that would last decades. The trip had been planned as a peaceful getaway, a break from the flashing cameras and non-stop Hollywood pressure. To the public, Natalie and Robert looked like the perfect couple, all smiles, glamour, and love. But behind that image hid deep cracks, silent arguments, hidden insecurities, and the constant strain of fame. That night, those buried emotions erupted again. The fiery chemistry between Natalie and Wagner, a love that had burned on and off since the 1950s, began to spiral out of control. Their passion could light up any room, but it could also destroy it in seconds. And adding to the tension was Christopher Walken, Natalie's co-star from her final film, Brainstorm, whose presence that night made everything even more uneasy. Something dark was brewing on that yacht, and no one was ready for what was about to unfold. The growing closeness between Christopher Walken and Natalie Wood made Robert Wagner burn with jealousy, a quiet tension that simmered all night long until it finally exploded. Captain Dennis DeVerne later said the evening started calm, filled with laughter and glasses clinking, but as more bottles opened, the mood shifted. The air in that small cabin turned thick, heavy, like something was about to snap. What began as small talk turned into shouting. Wine splashed across the table, glass shattered, and tempers went wild. DeVerne claimed he heard Wagner yelling at his wife, "Get off my damn boat!"
Somebody's lying. Somebody hurt her. Somebody's hurting all of us.
A moment that changed everything. Wagner's rage boiled over after seeing Natalie and Walken speaking too closely, whispering in a way that cut deep into his pride. The scene turned explosive, with jealousy taking full control of the night. Then silence. Natalie, wearing only a thin nightgown, a soft feathered robe, a flannel nightdress, and socks, vanished from the deck without a sound. One moment she was there, the next gone into the dark ocean air. All that remained was the quiet splash of waves against the hull and a chilling emptiness. According to DeVerne, Wagner stopped anyone from turning on the searchlights, saying coldly, "Leave her there, let her learn a lesson." That line still sends shivers down the spine. Everyone knew Natalie's deep fear of open water, a phobia that had haunted her since childhood, so the idea of her getting into that dinghy alone made no sense at all. And then came the horror. Nearby boaters reported hearing a woman's desperate screams for help echoing through the night, but no one responded. Hours later, when the sun rose over Catalina on November 29th, the calm waters revealed a sight so chilling that Hollywood would never recover. Natalie Wood's body was discovered floating face down, just a mile from the splendor, her eyes closed like she'd drifted into an endless sleep. The haunting image shocked everyone. She was still wearing her thin nightgown, the same one she'd been seen in hours earlier, clinging to her skin like a final reminder of the mystery that made no sense at all. This was a woman terrified of deep water, so how could she end up alone in the ocean that had always haunted her dreams? Nearby, the yacht's rubber dinghy, Valiant, was found drifting close to shore. Untied, aimless, like a lost piece of a tragic puzzle. Investigators were baffled. The details didn't add up, and what came next only deepened the mystery. Dr. Thomas Noguchi, the famous coroner known for handling Hollywood's biggest tragedies, performed Natalie's autopsy, and what he found was disturbing. Her blood alcohol level was 0.19%, dangerously high, and mixed with pain medication and seasickness pills that could have left her barely able to move. Her body showed fresh bruises on her arms, wrists, and knees. Scratches marked her face and neck, signs that screamed struggle. Were these the marks of an accident, or the aftermath of something violent that happened before she hit the freezing water? The official investigation followed, but answers never came clean. Robert Wagner, tearful and shaken at her funeral, claimed total innocence. He avoided the press, saying little, while Christopher Walken completely vanished from public view, refusing to comment at all. Captain Dennis DeVerne, however, stood by his story, that he'd heard a fierce argument that night and believed the truth had been hidden under layers of lies for decades. Still, those secrets stayed buried, locked behind whispers, rumors, and the fog of Hollywood's silence. Wagner and Walken's original statements were vague, almost rehearsed. Wagner kept insisting there was no fight, that Natalie might have tried to take the dinghy ashore herself. But for a woman who feared water her entire life, that theory sounded impossible, and the world knew it. Christopher Walken later admitted that tension had been building that night. Natalie wanted to refocus on her career, while Wagner couldn't stand the idea. He reportedly hated the thought of her chasing new roles, especially alongside younger co-stars. That friction created a storm beneath the surface, one that would soon destroy everything. The official investigation wrapped up in 2003, calling it an accidental drowning. Case closed, or so everyone thought. But 8 years later, in 2011, the story exploded back into headlines when Captain Dennis DeVerne finally broke his silence. He confessed that he hadn't told the full truth before, and his new claims were shocking. DeVerne said Wagner not only refused to start a search when Natalie went missing, but instead sat calmly, drinking while she was gone. He recalled hearing what sounded like a splash, as if someone had been pushed, followed by Wagner's cold words echoing in his mind, "Leave her there!" That one line changed everything. DeVerne's confession, backed by two other witnesses who confirmed hearing a woman's desperate cries for help, pushed the Los Angeles police to reopen the case. The coroner then changed the official cause of death from accidental drowning to drowning and undetermined factors. Suddenly, this wasn't just an old Hollywood mystery. It was a reopened investigation with Wagner right back in the spotlight. Wagner, though, has always denied any wrongdoing. He insists the night was nothing more than a tragic accident. He described how he and Natalie argued about her work and her connection with Christopher Walken, saying, "I remember we were speaking loudly. I was angry. Maybe I overreacted, but then she walked away, and I thought she just needed some time alone." But when pressed about what happened next, Wagner only shook his head and muttered, "No one knows. None of us." That uncertainty, those missing pieces, became the fire that kept public suspicion alive. No one ever saw Natalie leave.
Were you shocked that the captain said that?
Well, it was rather transparent, you know. It was rather transparent. I hadn't seen him for a long time, and, you know, he wasn't the captain of the boat, you know.
No one could explain how she ended up in the dark water, and witnesses nearby swore they heard shouting, crashing sounds, and panic echoing through the night. Adding even more heat to the fire, Robert Wagner later admitted that in a burst of anger, he smashed a wine bottle on the table that night, an explosive moment that made many believe the argument had turned far more violent than he'd ever confessed. People began to question everything. If it was truly an accident, why did his story keep shifting? And why were there so many strange inconsistencies every time he spoke about that night? In his memoir, Pieces of My Heart, Wagner tried to explain his version of events. He wrote, "I just wanted peace, but everything turned chaotic, and then she was gone." He described realizing Natalie was missing as a waking nightmare, saying he ran through the yacht calling her name. "I thought she was angry and hiding somewhere," he said. But when he noticed the dinghy was missing, his heart sank. He knew something was terribly wrong. Still, the public wasn't convinced. His claim, "I thought she was just angry," didn't sit right with anyone. If he was truly worried, why did it take hours before anyone called for help? That haunting question hung over him for years. When an interviewer asked whether he felt responsible, Wagner went silent for a long time before finally saying, "I was the last man with her. I can't deny that. Maybe I could have stopped it if I'd done something differently, but I don't know. All I know is that since that night, I've never been the same." His words only deepened the mystery. Some of his friends, including actress Jill St. John, who later became his wife, stayed loyal and defended him fiercely. But others weren't so sure, keeping their distance and their doubts. That divide left Wagner trapped under a heavy shadow that never lifted. And then, years later, in 2018, his name exploded back into the headlines once again, reigniting a case Hollywood thought it had buried forever. Police officially named Robert Wagner a person of interest, revealing that Natalie Wood's bruises matched signs of a possible assault, a chilling detail that reignited public suspicion. Lieutenant John Carina stated bluntly, "Wagner was the last person with her," adding that his story had changed multiple times over the years. Those inconsistencies raised eyebrows everywhere. Then came two new witnesses who made the mystery even darker. One claimed to have heard shouting and screams echoing from the Splendor's cabin that night. Another remembered earlier incidents where Wagner had allegedly shown aggression toward Natalie during their marriage. But despite all that, Wagner, now 88 years old, denied every accusation through his lawyer, calling the claims baseless. Christopher Walken, meanwhile, stayed silent, refusing to say a single word. Though the case had been reopened, the truth still danced just out of reach. In 2022, investigators cleared Wagner of official suspicion due to insufficient evidence. Yet the case itself was never closed. Then in 2024, everything flared up again when two more witnesses came forward. One was a fisherman, just 17 years old back then, who said he clearly heard a woman's desperate cries for help coming from the dark water that night. The other was a former Hollywood colleague who remembered seeing Wagner handle Natalie roughly during the 1960s. These new accounts reignited the controversy, sending shockwaves through fans and investigators alike. Author Marty Rooley, in his explosive book Natalie Wood and the Devil She Knew, went so far as to demand Wagner's prosecution before his death, saying justice had been avoided for far too long. Yet with every revelation, the truth seemed to flicker, appearing for a moment, then slipping back beneath the cold, dark surface of mystery. So what really happened that night? Did Natalie slip and fall in a drunken haze, or was she pushed in a jealous rage? Did Wagner truly lose control in a moment of fury? The world may never know, but the evidence still whispers, and the shadow of suspicion over Robert Wagner refuses to fade. For decades, the Los Angeles Police Department has wrestled with this haunting mystery, trying to piece together fragments of that night to uncover what really happened to Natalie Wood. Bit by bit, the evidence began to suggest that her death might not have been an accident at all, but something far more personal. Something involving Robert Wagner himself. The first red flag, a chilling 4-hour gap before anyone even reported Natalie missing. According to the yacht's clock, she was last seen around 11 p.m., yet the Coast Guard didn't get a call until 3:30 a.m. What was happening during those lost hours? Captain Dennis DeVerne later testified that he begged Wagner to switch on the searchlights, but Wagner snapped back coldly. "Dennis, don't turn that on." That moment has haunted him ever since. During those long, silent hours, instead of calling for help, everyone on board just stayed there, waiting, unsure, trapped in confusion and fear. By the time authorities were finally contacted, it was far too late. When investigators pressed DeVerne years later, he admitted his first statement was a lie, one made out of fear and pressure from Wagner himself. He revealed that Wagner had explicitly ordered him not to use the spotlight, not to radio for help, and not to talk to anyone about what had happened that night. Wagner's control over the situation was total and terrifying. This account lined up with the testimony of Harbor Master Doug Den, who confirmed he had to force Wagner to agree before the Coast Guard was finally alerted at 3:30 a.m. 4 precious hours gone, and with them, maybe the only chance to save Natalie. Then came the autopsy, which exposed even darker truths. Natalie's body bore multiple bruises across her arms and face, along with scratches on her neck. Injuries that forensic experts confirmed happened before she ever hit the water. Her blood alcohol level was 0.14%, enough to make her disoriented, and she had both seasickness medication and painkillers in her system, a dangerous mix that left her weak and vulnerable. Every new detail made the night look less like an accident and more like a confrontation gone horribly wrong. These findings brought one haunting question to the surface. If Natalie Wood's death was truly an accident, then why were there clear signs of a struggle? Something didn't add up. Robert Wagner told a completely different story, insisting that Natalie simply left the cabin to check on the dinghy lines, claiming she must have slipped, fallen, and drowned. But the evidence tore that version apart. When investigators found the dinghy, it looked untouched. The key was still in the ignition, the engine off, and the oars neatly tied down, as if no one had even tried to use it. There were no drag marks, no signs of struggle, nothing to suggest the boat had ever left the yacht. So how could Natalie have left on her own? The answer, or the cover-up, remained buried in confusion and silence. Police also discovered troubling inconsistencies between the testimonies of Wagner, Walken, and Captain Dennis DeVerne. Walken admitted there had been a heated argument between Wagner and Natalie before she vanished. DeVerne confirmed hearing loud thuds, raised voices, and then an eerie, sudden silence. Wagner, however, denied there had been any major fight.
But I had a great deal of support and help. I had my 3 daughters who were right by my side.
But in his own memoir, he contradicted himself, confessing there was a confrontation involving him, Natalie, and Walken, a clash over her growing career and independence. That single admission reignited suspicion that the tension on board had reached a breaking point before tragedy struck. Investigators started to wonder if jealousy, anger, and pride had spiraled into something deadly that night. The most chilling evidence, though, came from two independent witnesses, Marilyn Wayne and John Payne, who were staying on a nearby yacht, the Capricorn. Around 11 p.m., they heard a woman's desperate screams cutting through the dark waves. "Help me! Someone!" Those cries shattered the stillness of the night and left behind echoes that still haunt Hollywood to this day. "Please help me!" Those desperate cries tore through the darkness and thick fog for nearly 15 minutes. Marilyn Wayne, who was on her nearby yacht, said she rushed to turn on her deck light, trying to see where the screams were coming from. Then, suddenly, a man's calm, deep voice echoed back through the night. "Okay, honey, we'll get you." But no engine started, no movement followed, just silence. A long, chilling, suffocating silence that felt like the world itself had stopped breathing. When that forgotten testimony resurfaced years later, it sent shockwaves through the entire investigation. Everyone wanted to know, who was the man behind that calm voice? Only a handful of boats were anchored near the Splendor that night, meaning there were few possible answers. If that voice really belonged to Robert Wagner, then his quiet, almost detached, "Okay, honey," may have been the final words Natalie Wood ever heard before disappearing into the black water. And in a cruel twist, Wagner later claimed that he had been searching the yacht for Natalie at that exact time, insisting he never heard a single cry from the sea. That contradiction made investigators' blood run cold. Even more terrifying was Marilyn Wayne's later revelation that someone tried to silence her. Not long after she went public, she found a note slipped into her mailbox that read, "If you value your life, keep quiet about what you know." The sender was never found. To this day, Wayne has stood by her story, insisting that the screams she heard that night were unmistakably real, filled with pure panic and fear. Investigators later theorized that Wagner's motive might have been fueled by jealousy. That night's party, once filled with laughter and champagne, had spiraled into a fierce argument after Wagner accused Natalie of getting too close to her co-star, Christopher Walken. The tension, the alcohol, the anger, it was a dangerous mix that may have led to tragedy. In 2012, after a full re-examination of the evidence, the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office made a stunning move, officially changing Natalie Wood's cause of death from accidental drowning to drowning and other undetermined factors. It was a chilling reminder that even decades later, the truth behind that night still refuses to rest. This moment marked a major turning point in the case, the spark that brought Natalie Wood's mysterious death roaring back into the spotlight. With new evidence and testimony on the table, the police officially reopened the investigation. They publicly declared that Robert Wagner's statements didn't match the physical evidence and, for the first time, labeled him a person of interest directly tied to Natalie's death. It was a bombshell that rocked Hollywood. Yet even then, no solid physical proof emerged to show Wagner had killed his wife. The truth of what happened inside that small yacht cabin remains a ghost story, untouchable, hidden between the sound of crashing waves, the chill of the ocean wind, and the silence of three men who each told a different version of the night. But through all the years of speculation and cover-ups, one voice refused to fade away: Natalie's younger sister, Lana Wood. While Hollywood moved on, Lana never stopped fighting. She stood firm for decades, her voice cutting through the industry's polished silence. On television, in interviews, and in her own books, Lana said it plainly, without hesitation, "I believe Robert killed my sister." Those words hit like thunder, breaking the wall of silence that had protected Hollywood's golden image for years. For Lana, the most horrifying part wasn't just Natalie's death. It was the years of quiet, the unanswered questions, and Wagner's deliberate refusal to speak openly. He had declined to cooperate in every reopened investigation from 2011 to 2018. To her, that silence screamed guilt. "An innocent man fights to prove his innocence," she said. "A guilty man hides when asked." Her haunting question still echoes to this day. If he truly loved my sister, why has he stayed silent before justice? It's a question that refuses to die, and one that keeps the mystery of Natalie Wood alive, even decades after her final night on the water. In her emotional memoir, Little Sister, Lana Wood revealed that Captain Dennis DeVerne had come to her years later with a shocking confession. He admitted that he had lied to protect Robert Wagner. According to Lana, DeVerne told her about the terrifying chaos on board that night, how Wagner and Natalie got into a violent argument, how he heard a loud crash, shouting, and then Wagner's cold command echoing through the yacht, "Don't turn on the lights, don't call anyone." Those words froze Lana's heart. That confession reignited every suspicion she had ever buried. Lana became convinced that Wagner had snapped in a jealous rage, and that after their fight, he left Natalie alone in the freezing darkness, knowing her terror of deep water, letting her struggle for her life as the waves swallowed the night. What broke Lana most wasn't just the thought of her sister dying. It was knowing how afraid of water Natalie had always been. As a little girl, she'd almost drowned during a film shoot, a trauma that haunted her forever. Lana said, "My sister would never have stepped into a dinghy at night, especially not in her nightgown, in the cold." To her, the accident theory wasn't just false. It was an insult to Natalie's intelligence and caution. In Lana's eyes, the man once idolized as the symbol of Hollywood romance had become something else entirely, a ghost. A ghost burdened with cold and dark as the waters where Natalie Wood took her final breath. Decades have passed, and Natalie's story has morphed into a Hollywood legend, a tragic mix of love, fame, and unanswered questions. But the pain still lingers not only for her family, but for Robert himself and for the millions of fans who still can't let go. Her death isn't just a mystery. It's a heartbreaking story of love turned to loss, of regret that refuses to fade, and of secrets that time itself can't wash away. Even now, every time Natalie Wood's name is spoken, that darkness comes rushing back, the fog, the waves, the silence. And through it all, Robert Wagner remains a man haunted by guilt, whispers, and the heavy shadow of a night that has followed him for over 40 years. Robert Wagner almost vanished from the world after that tragic night. The man once adored for his charm, sophistication, and Hollywood grace became quiet, distant, a shadow of who he used to be. The press surrounded him, flashing cameras in his face, demanding answers he never seemed ready to give. The public speculated, detectives interrogated, but Wagner barely spoke. His voice was soft, broken, and filled with grief as he once whispered, "When Natalie died, I thought my life ended too." Once a celebrated television icon and leading man, he transformed into someone haunted by his past. A man who couldn't escape the weight of one horrifying night. For decades, he lived under the heavy fog of suspicion, the endless whispers, the looks that followed him everywhere. Then, as the years passed and he entered his 90s, Wagner began to speak more openly. Age and failing health had stripped away his defenses, forcing him to confront the ghosts he'd buried deep inside. Every time Natalie's name was mentioned, it tore him apart. Those memories dragged him back into that endless nightmare, the sound of waves, the silence after the shouting, the moment everything changed forever. Whether the full truth was ever revealed or not, it clung to him like a shadow that refused to fade.
When we did The Mountain, we went to France together. Oh, it was great. I was on top. It was the best time. It was the best.
The darkness of that fateful night never truly left him. It turned Robert Wagner from a charming Hollywood legend into a man forever burdened by tragedy and suspicion. No longer just defending himself, he became a man visibly worn down by guilt and pain, a man haunted by what-ifs. In a trembling voice, he admitted, "I will never truly understand what happened that night. I ask myself every day, what if I had done something differently? If I had gone to her sooner, would she still be here?" Those words, raw and stripped of glamour, revealed the unbearable torment he carried for the rest of his life. In his memoir, Pieces of My Heart, Wagner wrote about losing Natalie Wood with deep sorrow, confessing emotions that no fame or fortune could ever hide. "Not a day goes by that I don't think of Natalie," Robert Wagner once said. "I loved her with all my heart, and losing her was the darkest moment of my life." His words were filled with sorrow, but for many, they weren't enough. The contradictions in his story, the silence that night, despite the screams, the bruises on Natalie's body, and the hours-long delay in calling for help, all of it tore public opinion apart. Some believed Wagner wasn't a killer, just a man crushed by guilt, punished by memory rather than law. But others were certain that the truth about that night still lay buried deep beneath years of lies and secrecy. For decades, the world couldn't agree. To some, he was a grieving husband. To others, the villain of one of Hollywood's darkest unsolved tragedies. Yet behind the headlines, beyond the rumors and speculation, stood an aging man who had lost the love of his life. Wagner withdrew from the spotlight, choosing silence over fame, living out his final years quietly, haunted by what might have been. His life had turned into a ghost story, one built from love, regret, and endless questions that no one could answer. Then came Natalie's daughter, Natasha Wagner, her voice soft but steady, stepping forward to defend him. "He loved my mother deeply," she said. "Whatever happened that night, it wasn't murder. It was a tragedy." Her words divided people once again. Many thought Natasha was choosing faith over truth, but for her, it wasn't a choice. It was instinct. "I can feel his sadness every day," she explained. "It's a heaviness, so real. I can see it. I can touch it." In her memoir, More Than Love, Natasha revealed heartbreaking details of Wagner's later years, how he avoided the ocean completely, how he would freeze at the sight of Natalie's photo, staring in silence before quietly walking away. Those moments painted a picture that no police report could ever capture. A man forever trapped between love and guilt, between memory and silence. Her words remind the world that this story isn't just about evidence, rumors, or accusations. It's about loss, heartbreak, and the kind of pain that never fades, no matter how many years pass. It's the heartbreaking tragedy of a family torn apart by grief and silence. A story that still echoes through Hollywood's history. Robert Wagner lived out his remaining years in quiet endurance, burdened by memories that refused to fade. No one could ever give a final answer to what truly happened that night, but one thing was certain. His love and loss for Natalie Wood never died. It remained in his heart like a flame that refused to go out, a haunting mix of love, regret, and the irreversible weight of tragedy. Friends described Wagner as fragile but strangely peaceful in his final years. He found comfort in his grandchildren, in old photographs, and in fragments of laughter that still lived in his memory. In his private journals, he wrote about Natalie endlessly, about her smile, her laughter, and that unmistakable spark in her eyes. "Natalie could command a room just by being in it," he wrote. To Wagner, she wasn't just his wife. She was his compass, his anchor, his reason to keep going. When she died, he said, it felt like he was lost in an endless, freezing world with no direction home. By 2025, as his health began to fail, Robert Wagner finally decided to speak one last time about the night that had defined and destroyed so much of his life. His voice was soft, trembling with age and emotion. "People call me a monster, a liar, a coward," he said. "But the truth is simpler than that. I was a man in love who made mistakes, and I've paid for them every single day since." Though not a confession of guilt, those words carried the heavy weight of regret, a lifetime of sorrow etched into every syllable. It was the first time the public saw through the Hollywood polish and into the heart of the man himself, weary, remorseful, and forever haunted by a love that ended in tragedy. For the first time, the mask of mystery slipped away. What remained was not the glamorous movie star, but a broken man finally facing the ghosts of his past. A man who had loved deeply, lost tragically, and lived the rest of his life trapped between truth and the words he could never bring himself to say. The memories of Natalie Wood never left Robert Wagner. They stayed with him, like a quiet light flickering in the long darkness of his life. To the world, he had been a suave Hollywood icon. But behind that charm was a father, a husband, and a man who loved deeply yet suffered endlessly from heartbreak and loss. When news of Wagner's passing broke, a wave of remembrance swept across Hollywood, a mix of nostalgia, grief, and lingering questions that refused to fade. Some remembered his dazzling career, his charm, and that timeless love story with Natalie Wood that had once defined an era. Others couldn't forget the mystery, the unanswered questions that followed him right to his final breath. But perhaps in the end, Robert and Natalie finally found the peace that life had long denied them. Robert Wagner's legacy isn't just about guilt or scandal. It's about humanity. It's a story of love, sorrow, and the unbearable pain he carried quietly through his final years. Whether the truth of that fateful night off Catalina Island ever comes fully to light or remains forever hidden beneath the waves, one thing is certain: love and tragedy will always define their story. Together, they became symbols not only of Hollywood glamour, but of hearts that could never truly let go. Rewinding time to the beginning, their relationship was never as perfect as the world imagined. Behind the smiles, there were storms. Natalie and Wagner's love had passion, but it also had conflict, the kind that burned bright and broke hard. They were Hollywood's golden couple of the 1950s, the dream pairing everyone envied. Natalie Wood, the wide-eyed young starlet whose smile could light up a screen, and Robert Wagner, the smooth leading man with the polished charm of post-war America. Their connection ran deep, beginning when Natalie was just a young girl of 10, meeting the handsome 18-year-old actor who would one day become both her great love and her greatest heartbreak. From that moment on, their lives were destined to intertwine in ways that would captivate the world. A love story made for the movies, but shadowed by a tragedy that time itself could never erase. As a little girl, Natalie Wood once leaned over to her mother and whispered, "I'm going to marry that man." It sounded like a child's dream, but just a few years later, that prophecy became real. Hollywood couldn't get enough of them. The press called them the dream couple, the perfect Hollywood romance everyone envied. When Robert Wagner proposed, he did it with flair, hiding a pearl ring inside a glass of champagne. Natalie burst into tears and said yes, her voice trembling with joy. Their 1957 wedding was a true Hollywood spectacle. Natalie, the glowing 19-year-old bride in white, and Wagner, the polished tuxedo-clad groom. It looked like something straight out of a movie, a love story too perfect to ever break. But behind the flashing cameras and smiling headlines, they were just two young people trying to figure out life. Caught between fame, gossip, and the unbearable pressure of being Hollywood's golden pair. In those early years, Wagner was Natalie's safe place, the man who made her feel grounded amid the chaos of stardom. But soon, the balance began to shift. Natalie's career exploded with Rebel Without a Cause and West Side Story, while Wagner's work started to fade into the background. The spotlight that once united them slowly began to divide them. She was the rising star, and he was struggling to keep up. Love that had once shone so brightly began to crack under the weight of pride, jealousy, and insecurity. The tension built quietly, through whispered arguments, cold silences, and forced smiles at glamorous parties. Natalie longed for independence, for artistic growth, for freedom beyond her marriage. Wagner, terrified of losing her, wanted to keep her close, hidden from the hungry eyes of Hollywood. Friends later recalled seeing Natalie crying backstage, worn down by rumors of affairs, public pressure, and her husband's growing need for control. What had started as a fairy tale romance was slowly turning into a storm, one where love and jealousy fought for control, and the perfect Hollywood couple began to unravel behind closed doors. In 1962, Natalie Wood shocked Hollywood. She filed for divorce. The world couldn't believe it. The golden couple everyone thought was untouchable had fallen apart. Their picture-perfect love story, the one splashed across magazine covers, was suddenly over. But even through the heartbreak, their love never truly disappeared. It just went quiet for a while. Nearly a decade later, after both had endured broken marriages and lonely years, fate pulled them back together. In 1972, Natalie and Robert Wagner remarried in a small, intimate ceremony aboard a yacht off the coast of Malibu, the same waters that would one day carry their darkest memory. This time, they promised each other that age and experience had made them stronger. "I think we went through hell to find each other again. Natalie said in an interview, her voice full of hope. They welcomed a daughter, Courtney, and for a while, life seemed calm. The tabloids wrote about their second chance at love, and to the public it looked like a perfect Hollywood comeback story. But beneath the surface, the past hadn't really gone anywhere. It just slept, waiting. Natalie could sense it. Wagner's quiet unease, that edge in his voice that hinted at old jealousy creeping back in. By the late 1970s, Wagner's TV career had reignited with Heart to Heart, while Natalie was preparing for her big screen return in Brainstorm, the film that would tragically become her last. On set, her growing friendship with co-star Christopher Walken began to make Wagner uncomfortable. Friends described his jealousy as a slow-burning fire. It didn't explode right away. But once it did, there was no stopping it. Those close to the couple said Wagner began questioning Natalie constantly about her friendships, her career, and even her time on set. He was terrified she might drift away again, the way she had once before. Then came that fateful weekend. Seeing her laugh with Walken, confident and radiant beside another man at the height of his fame, struck something deep in Wagner, something raw, something dangerous. And many believe that in that single moment, love turned to rage, and Robert Wagner lost control. Whatever the truth may be, the night of November 28th, 1981, still stands as one of Hollywood's most chilling mysteries. Natalie Wood, the dazzling star whose beauty and talent captured the world, met her end in the cold, black waters of the Pacific, taking the real story with her. Police, witnesses, and journalists have all spoken. Yet after more than 40 years, one haunting question refuses to fade. What really happened aboard the Splendor that night? Was it a tragic accident, a split second of blind jealousy, or something far darker? A crime buried under layers of fame, fear, and silence. The clues tell one story, the people tell another, and the truth still drifts somewhere in between. Natalie's death remains frozen in time, a riddle no one has been able to solve. Not completely. And now the question turns to you. What do you believe? Was it fate, fury, or a secret that Hollywood still protects to this very day? Who do you think holds the final piece of this haunting puzzle? Drop your thoughts below. Your theory might be closer to the truth than you think. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this story. If you love unsolved mysteries, hidden Hollywood scandals, and forgotten truths, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. You never miss our next deep dive.